And welcome to the CBC Alumni Report. I'm Rob Stagenborg, Alumni Director, and really excited to talk to my old friend, Joe Vitale, the voice of the St. Louis Blues. Joe, 2004 grad, welcome back to CBC. How's things going?
Hey, well, Rob, appreciate you bringing me on. Things are really good. You know, you mentioned voice. You're one of those teachers that I'll never forget because of your voice. You know, I'm sure you've gotten that a lot. You got that really
deep.
A couple times. Yeah. You got that deep, raspy voice. You actually be perfect for the radio.
I was going for your job. I'm a big Blues fan, so you better watch it. So let's talk about the Blues again. You guys, you went from year one, jumped into the role. The Blues win the Stanley Cup, amazing ride. Year two, man, everything just kind of got screwed up. Talk to us about that transition between year one, riding that high, and then getting into year two, and then the problems and the pandemic, and then just the way everything kind of worked out. Talk to us about it.
Yeah, it's been a crazy couple of years. I guess I got to start just very briefly with the summer before I got hired by the Blues, and this is the time of my retirement from hockey, and I'm just kind of lost in the middle of different things and trying to find my way. And it was a very confusing time, a time that I had to really dig deep into prayer and trust God that there's a plan out there. And sure enough, Chris Kerber and I connected just spontaneously when a job opportunity came up that only comes up once in a lifetime. So I get the job after a long summer of interviewing with a lot of great people that were up for the job. And then I go from that to a full year later, actually less than a year later, being on the stage holding the Stanley Cup with the St. Louis Blues. I mean, so you talk about the peaks and valleys of life. It's amazing, the incredible lows that you go through. And then 1 year later, the incredible high of my first year being in the booth, the Blues winning the first Stanley Cup in the franchise history. And then back down to the low, as you just mentioned. That's why it's be grateful for when you're at the top and pray when you're at the bottom, because then the pandemic hits a year later. The Blues are in first place in March, right before the pause. Looks like they're possibly going to repeat another terrific season for the team, and super happy for the guys, a great group of gentlemen. And then the pandemic hits, and it's a very crazy year for a lot of people, far worse than hockey goes, just a lot going on in the world. So the pandemic, the off season, the crazy summer, and then this bubble thing that a lot of players just were not sure about. You can tell by watching the games that a lot of these Blues players just, it didn't feel right? We have an older team, a lot of wives, a lot of kids. Petro had a baby during the bubble. Ivan Barbashev had a baby during the bubble. Tons of distractions, and you're in this hotel room. You're not really asked to leave. So it was a crazy time, and I don't blame the Blues for the performance that they had. It was unfortunate by all means, but it is a lot. It lessens the blow, I guess, Rob, when you look at a year ago, you win a Stanley Cup. So I think that the guys were pretty happy with that.
Sure. So let's talk about the bubble a little bit, because again, here you guys are broadcasting, things are going very well, and it all just kind of evaporates, and this whole system rolls out. A lot of people were very much complimentary towards the NHL for taking the approach and really mitigating the situation. But you're right, it wasn't the same. It's different, compacted season. The fact that the Tampa Bay Lightning won, obviously they deserved it. They played very well. The Blues, obviously, we wanted them to win, but they just didn't. It's just such a weird year. How do you kind of come back next year and say, okay, that's over, let's go back to normal, quote unquote normal?
Right. Yeah, no, they're really good questions. And I think that Gary Bettman and Bill Daly and all the teams and owners and players are probably asking the same questions as far as when do we start. The bubble, I will say, when they got to Edmonton and when half the teams got to Toronto, there was a lot of discussion of what type of team is going to win the cup throughout this process. You're asking these players to go to a hotel, quarantine away from their wives, their kids, their families, their friends, and they could be up there for as long as 2.5 months in a hotel room, and they really couldn't do much. What type of personality, what type of characteristics in the team will we see win the championship? And for me, I really felt as if the Blues and the Bruins repeat was going to be known as probably going to happen, because like the two veteran teams that have been through the grind, that enjoy each other's company. They're going to be around each other a lot. So that's what I initially thought. And then as the tournament kind of evolved, you kind of saw a lot of these younger teams surprise people. The Chicago Blackhawks, who were the youngest team in the National Hockey League at the time, they swept that first round, right? So you're like, wow, so maybe it's going to be a young Edmonton Oilers team or a Chicago Blackhawks team. Rob, these kids nowadays, all they do is sit in their hotel rooms and their home and play video games all day long anyway. So maybe it'll be one of these younger teams that does it. But at the end, you look at the Tampa Bay and the Dallas matchup for the final, and it was, to me, two teams that were as desperate as ever to win a Stanley Cup. And I think that's what I missed. It's what a lot of people missed. The team that was going to win it in the bubble was going to be the most desperate team. And you look at Tampa Bay Lightning and Dallas Stars. Dallas Stars were one bounce away, remember now, from making it to the Western Conference Final last year before Pat Maroon put the city on his shoulders, as Chris Kerber said. So Dallas was close. They've been close. They've been nipping at the door for a long time now. Tampa Bay, they've had a lot of expectations over the last 3 to 4 years. They just have not gotten the job done, but they've come very close. And they have way too talented of a group to not win a cup. So 2 very desperate teams, but a huge congratulations there to Tampa Bay Lightning, as you just mentioned. Where do we go from here? Well, it's technically now the offseason. Free agency's past us. We've lost Petro. We've gotten our draft picks. Now it's this complete reset. You're looking at about 6 to 7 to 8 weeks more of this. Gary Bettman has said that we're looking at an early January start date. A lot of Blues fans are pretty excited about the theory that will opening night be the Minnesota Wild and St. Louis Blues for the already scheduled game, keep in mind, at Target Field up in Minnesota as the outdoor game for the Winter Classic. So wouldn't that be a cool way to kick off the season? So everyone's kind of got that in their mind. Is it a little ambitious to think that January 1 is going to be the start date? I think still a little bit, especially because there's just so much we don't know. One thing to keep in mind about hockey is, these football stadiums are being kind of filled at 20%. Soccer stadiums, 30, 40%. That's all great, but they're all outside. So hockey is an indoor sport where sometimes, you don't think about during a pandemic, but how does that affect the virus, the spread? So the hockey whole organization and everyone around the league is trying to do their due diligence to try to figure out how to make this work. So I would like to think that realistically, probably a mid to end January start date. It'll probably be a shortened season, much like we see with lockout seasons, 50, 60, 65 games around that range, get into playoffs and play some hockey. But one thing I'll finish off with this, Rob, hockey needs fans. They need people in the buildings for revenue to generate to keep this league going. NFL, NBA, they're okay. They thrive off these big monster TV deals that we all know about. But hockey is a specific sport that without fans coming into those buildings, ticket sales, jersey sales, without that, I don't know how much longer the NHL can withstand this kind of burden. So it's going to be important for them to figure out a way to get fans in those buildings.
Good point. One of the things that, a lot of the guys that you played with as a young person, the youth scene here in St. Louis has exploded. We got several St. Louisans playing in the league and performing at a high level. What's it like to be able to, be a broadcaster and you're covering basically, people that you played with or people that you know very closely because of this explosion of youth hockey here in St. Louis. How cool is that?
It's an honor, really. I mean, when I'm up there calling games and I see a Pat Maroon and digging a puck out of the corner, or I see a sliding save by Ben Bishop, or when Wideman was in the league, or Paul Stastny wins a faceoff. It's all these memories just certainly come back. Scotty Mayfield is another big one here from Webster Groves here in St. Louis. It's an honor. It's an honor to know these kids when they grew up, and it's an honor to see how they got there. I mean, that's the biggest thing. I mean, they're at here now. They're making millions. I'm so happy and proud of them. But to me, it was always that journey. It was always that story of who they were back in the day and how they went about their business and their hockey profession to get to where they were. To give an example, Scotty Mayfield was a undersized kid for a while, played JV hockey at Webster Groves. He was a late bloomer, and now he signs a mega deal with the New York Islanders. He's a stud defenseman for the Islanders out on the East Coast over there. So it's kind of cool to see those stories, players that you kind of forget about. Paul Stastny's another one. Paul and I grew up together, went to Chaminade briefly in 7th and 8th grade before I moved on to CBC. And, he was just always right in the middle of the pack. He didn't really stand out. He had great vision, good hands, good shot, but he was slow, kind of lethargic on the ice. So you always look back on the journeys of all these players. Pat Maroon, another big, slow kid. And it's so crazy to see how they've just kind of kept at it, Rob. And for me, the common denominator for all these kids that are now in the league from growing up here in St. Louis, one thing really stands out. They just enjoy the game. We 20 years ago, 30 years ago, we didn't have ambitions to play barely college hockey. I mean, we were from St. Louis. There was really no good coaches here. My dad coached me. He's in construction. I had the next year, my coach was like in a painting business, and we didn't have great coaches. We just had dads to say, get on the ice and go score a goal. That's all we knew how to do. So, but we loved the game, and we came to the rink every day just enjoying the game and wanting to do it more and just love being around each other. So I think that love really just was put out as a product on the ice. And then all these great successes of these players is just a byproduct of how much we loved it. Nowadays, it's hard. It's tricky for kids because you have the Matthew Tkachuk's and the Brady Tkachuk's and all these great players around St. Louis going in the first round. And now a lot of parents put a lot of pressure on kids to to be that, to play college hockey, to play junior hockey, to maybe make the pros and all these things. And I think what happens, Rob, is 30 years ago where we just loved the game and then the success of the game was a byproduct. I think nowadays so many kids are putting the end game in sight, like NHL and college hockey. They're putting that in their sights, and they're missing out on enjoying the game. And I think that's what's kind of been hurting a lot of kids lately, at least from what I've seen. And I just wish we could get back to just having passion for the game, enjoying your teammates, sticking with your teammates for a long progression, having coaches that just instill that passion and fun and love for the game. Because when you do that, all those great things, if the kids are having fun, they're going to do great things. But not to put too much pressure on kids at a very young age is going to be important. But yeah, look at all these guys in the NHL, man. They just loved what they did. We loved all competing and being with each other. And I'm just super happy to see St. Louis continue to be represented so well in the National Hockey League.
And if you're just joining us, we're with Joe Vitale, St. Louis Blues broadcaster, CBC alumnus of 2004. And I kind of want to talk to you a little bit about your time here at CBC. You spent 3 years at the old school. You graduated from the new school. Talk about that whole transition period. I mean, it had to be a little bit bizarre for you to kind of go to two different schools. But what are some of your memories of CBC as you look back?
Well, the biggest one was the transition from junior to senior year, where within the first 2 months of that transition, there were so many hiccups, Rob, with the technology and so I actually used that to my advantage quite a bit. If I didn't get an assignment done or, you erased, the old school way, you wrote it and you turned it in, and, you're good to go. But I use technology. I think a lot of us use technology as a crutch for a while. But after the third month, you guys pretty much worked out the kinks, so we couldn't get away with that anymore. My experience at CBC was terrific. I think some of my dearest memories probably were my freshman year at the old school, where it was just so new. I'll never forget, remember Liz's office was, the size of like a small little house bathroom. Like, it was so small. In Ray Barr's office, he had the rusted razors from all the kids who weren't shaving those mornings. He had carpets up the walls, as you remember, on those stairs to get to the fourth floor were like climbing Mount Everest. No AC. Just sweating, listening to Mr. Brumfield or Mr. Delpha on the fourth floor. To me, that was what it was about. We had such a good conglomerate of kids from all over St. Louis. And even at the new school too, we really felt that. We felt that you're sitting to the right of a guy who's from, South County in Oakville, who dad's a painter. And then to the left of you may be an oil tycoon, a guy out in West County. And then you have an incredible athlete who's sitting in front of you from North County, who, it was just an amazing mix of kids. And that's what I appreciated the most, was that you got to be well-versed in a lot of different facets of life, because you're kind of living vicariously through all your friends. And you saw how people live, and you saw how people handle themselves, conduct themselves. And then not only that, but to be put all in the same sport field and in the ice rink to compete with each other. It was a wonderful experience. I love the brothers. Brother Larry had a huge impact on me when he was president here at CBC. Brother Chris, who recently passed away a few years back, who was my the biology teacher. He was probably the most impactful teacher in my entire education existence. Having him there in biology, he had that little room right by the parking lot, and I'll never forget just, the brothers, they just take it a step further. Like, he'd always have these after school study hours, and his brother Chris didn't have a family, didn't have kids. Like, he was there for us, and you felt that, right? Like, when school was ended, if he knew the guys were struggling with the chemistry, the balancing the equations, he's like, all right, well, Tuesdays and Thursdays this week, I'll be here till 6. Come, you show up around 4 p.m. We'd show up in our street clothes, and Brother Chris is just in his street clothes, and we would just balance equations. It was something that you just don't see a lot of anymore. And I think that connection from God to students through the brothers was something that was so evident at my time in CBC. And I miss it greatly. I do.
Again, your father was an alum, your brother's an alum, so you come obviously from an alumni family, and certainly we definitely appreciate your family support here at CBC. But I can't let you go without asking you, how's the sourdough going? Tell us about your sourdough business.
So I had a sourdough bread business for a while, which was, I mentioned the post-hockey confusion of life, and then sourdough business that was right in the mix of all that. When I got injured to end my career, I didn't sleep very well, and I just picked up sourdough bread. I got a sourdough starter from somebody and just started making a bunch of bread. And it was wonderful because it was my perfect rehab, because it got me focused on stuff that wasn't my own problems anymore, right? So my head injury and my facial injuries, whatever it was, I just started focusing on how to make a great loaf of bread. And so that was wonderful therapy in itself. And then one day I decided, hey, this is pretty good. I'm going to give a loaf to my neighbor. And then I gave a loaf to my neighbor, like hard work of bread, like being up all night to my neighbor. And the smile on his face, and then it just like clicked. I was like, oh my God, I like this. I want to keep doing this. This is pretty cool. So then I started giving them away, and people were like, hey man, you should sell this money. I was like, oh, okay. Light bulb went off. So I'm going to start selling it. So then restaurants around St. Louis kind of started hearing about me a little bit. And I started providing to some smaller restaurants. My first one was Fiddlehead, which is down over there in Botanical Heights. So I supplied to Darcy for a while. She was my first contact, and then I was working with Gerard Kraft down at the Four Seasons, his new restaurant down at the Four Seasons, to start a whole bread thing. And that's when the Blues called about the broadcasting job. So I came home, I talked to my wife. I said, well, babe, I got a couple bread things going here, or the Blues called me. And she said with her sweet face, she goes, honey, I love your bread, but I think this is an opportunity that doesn't come around very much. So I think she was right. I'm glad I did it. But I still do it. It's a great hobby. I love giving bread away to people. One day, maybe down the road, I'll turn it back into a business. But for right now, Rob, I tell you what, the Blues keep me very busy. My wife, we have 4 children, just had our 4th baby in March. So we are extremely busy, but I'm looking forward to that day where I could dive into bread a little bit more.
I can't let you go without asking you, because I heard in a radio interview you talked about some of the NHLers who had a huge impact on you. And you talked a little bit about Sidney Crosby and just the class he exuded and kind of how he reached out to you. I was wondering if you may be able to share some of that story with our audience about Sidney and your relationship with him.
Yeah, I think, Rob, the true measure of character for a person is how they treat people that are below them. We treat people that are as equal to us, or we reach out to people that are above us all the time, because we're always looking across from us or above us. But very rarely do people filled with good character, we do what they do, and that is they look down. I remember my first camp with Pittsburgh. The Pittsburgh Penguins just won the Cup in 2009. My first camp was in 2010. I'm in the locker room, super nervous, right? These guys are all Stanley Cup champions. Got Billy Gannon, a future Hall of Fame, over here. I got Evgeny Malkin over here. Marc-Andre Fleury is right sitting across from me. I'm super intimidated. Again, a kid from St. Louis. I was drafted in the last round and really didn't have a ton of business being there. So I remember sitting in the stall and I was like taping my stick, getting ready for the first practice. I remember how clammy my hands were and just like nervous. I was like shaking kind of uncontrollably. It was crazy. And I remember as I was taping my stick for like the 4th time, because I kept doing it and undoing it and doing it and undoing it, because I was just trying to kill time, right? I got a hit on the shoulder from a guy next to me. I looked over and it's Sidney Crosby. And he's like, hey man, I'm Sid, nice to meet you. And I said, yeah, I know who you are. I'm Sid. I know I'm Joe. He's like, yeah, I'm Sid. What are you? I go, you're Sid. I'm Joe. And we were just like, I already got tongue tied, right? I was already in a mess of a conversation. We were laughing. I got all red. And he goes, that's cool. It's cool. So where are you from? And he started talking to me like a person. You know what I mean? And this is the guy who just won the Conn Smythe, MVP in the National Hockey League, Stanley Cup champion, and the best hockey player in the world at the time, and arguably still is. And he reached out to this young guy that no one was talking to, no one was around. He probably never heard of me or seen me before. Again, I know really reality even make the team anywhere near down the road. And he sat down, he asked me about St. Louis. He talked about a couple restaurants he goes to when he's here. Do I have a family? How's the minors been? How was college? What was that experience like? And he literally just asked all about me for like 20 minutes. It was incredible. And then we left, and I remember how much better I felt personally going into camp that year. But also it really hit me what a true leader is. And I think a true leader is like what I just mentioned, Rob. It's a leader, a man who goes from self to service, right? And you look at Jesus, like why was Jesus the greatest leader of all time? Is because he went from self to service. Instead of people serving him, he decided to serve others, right? That's why he kind of turned the world upside down, because everyone thought he'd be this glamorous king we'd all bow to, but instead he actually turned to the poor. And that's what I look at like when I think of Sidney Crosby and Shane Doan, another great captain when I was with Arizona Coyotes. They're always about serving others. And I think that is just such a wonderful quality in those players. It's wonderful quality in a few people around me in my life. And when you're out there in that world, if you find people like that, gosh, grab onto them, hold them, bring them in, and keep them in that inner circle, because they're very rare, and it's a wonderful thing.
Well, Joe, we want to thank you for your time today. It's been a wonderful experience to learn about you and your career and kind of how things have been progressing. I want to invite all alumni when you are on campus to come by the DC Wilcutt Gymnasium. Joe, your CBC hockey jersey is up there framed. Obviously, it has to be a very proud moment for you to have your jersey framed at your old high school.
Yeah, it was good. It's right by the bathroom, which is funny, Rob. I actually used to skip math class by hiding out in that bathroom every now and then. So it kind of worked out pretty well. I don't recommend anyone doing that, but that's what I did.
Good deal. Again, Joe, we really appreciate your time. Best of luck to you as you move forward with the Blues and with season 3. Hopefully, it's a little bit more conventional. But again, we appreciate all you do, and we appreciate you representing CBC in such a fine manner. So I want to thank you for being with you. I'm going to go ahead and stop our recording. I'm going to have you put on hold for just a second. I'll get back with you, okay?
Sounds good, Rob. Thanks for having me, man. Appreciate it. Great catching up with you.
This is Joe Vitale, St. Louis Blues broadcaster. He's one of ours, and we invite you to tune in next season and follow him really throughout the year on the Blues website, on several of the local radio stations. He's definitely a man about town. So, Joe, thanks again.
Rob, thank you.